This is probably my third or fourth time trying to talk about this. The past few times I think I was just either very heated in the moment, or I felt numb, or I had too much going on and I just couldn't voice things out. I couldn't articulate. Whatever was in my head, I couldn't put it in words. This morning I spent my time writing on my thoughts, and I actually shared a post, which made it a lot easier. So I figured, you know what, today I want to pretty much share what I wrote on my post and bounce off that. That makes it so much easier. So, you know, I know for a lot of you guys, it has been heavy. It just seems like it's one thing after another. Now, at 34, I can really say it has been a while since I've been racially discriminated, in person anyway. And I think largely that is because I spend most of my time at home. It's a lockdown. And when I travel, I have the luxury to be able to drive around in my own car. For a lot of people, they don't have the privilege to stay at home. They have to go out to their workplaces. They have to travel in public transport. Since the beginning of the pandemic, this was something that a lot of us were weary about, and I think we just saw this snowball grow and grow and grow into an avalanche. A lot of us have been angry to see our elderly become targets, and a lot of us are also heartbroken. And you know, I think words hurt, but you so badly cross that line when lives are taken. Today, yeah, I want to just talk about the topic of racism. So growing up as an Asian in the UK, I just always figured that racism is just part of the package. My mom moved here, immigrated here when she was a child, and she always told me that, you know, she had to deal with racism. The school that I went to, I mean, I turned out fine, but I'm not gonna deny and sugarcoat it. It was a rough school. It's weird, when I look back at my experience of racism as a child and a teenager, I remember how fearful I used to be just walking down the corridors, and how I dodge certain corridors and make the longer route. Terms like chinky, gook, go back to your country, chink, like, I've heard it all. They're nothing out of the ordinary. I've experienced having food thrown at me. I've been pushed along the corridor like a ping pong. They would close the lights and just shove me around. I remember just wishing my friends would say something. When I used to go home and tell my mom about it, she would tell me to bring a bag of sweets, because that was what she did, and I didn't want to reward my bullies. I never did that. One time I couldn't take it and I told the girls to stop. They never stopped. They kept harassing me, and I ended up telling my teacher about it. Did it solve anything? No. It made the girls even angrier. So what worked for me was just dodging them. The most effective thing for me back then was to just dodge them in the end. And you know, I remember going to school each day in fear, and it wasn't until those girls stopped going to school, I think they stopped going in 5th form, where I started to feel safe. Safer, not safe. It wasn't until I was in 6th form that I started to feel alright, because by then I chose art as my A-levels. So I spent a majority of my time safe in the art classroom, and plus I was much older, one of the oldest ones in school. Again, I just thought it just comes with it. And I think a lot of you guys can relate what it's like to walk down a corridor and just wish and hope, like, please just let me walk, just let me go by quietly, peacefully. Now when I think back to it all, it's quite a blur, but the memory that I never ever forget is when I was walking home with my grandmother, and I can't remember where we were, but I remember we definitely had to cut through the park to get home. And I remember seeing a group of teenagers just hanging out at the gate. At that moment, I kind of had a feeling something bad was going to happen, and still in my mind I was thinking, please just let us pass. I must have been about 8 or 9 years old. I can't be sure. I was probably younger. Along comes the racial slurs. It wasn't just words, actual rocks were thrown. And I just remember at that moment my granny just hovering over me like an umbrella, covering me from the impact, and she would be the one that would end up getting hit by the rocks. And my granny doesn't speak she speaks very little English, but in that moment she just unleashed all the swear words that she can muster. And I remember peering from my grandmother's armpits, and I saw a familiar face, and this was the sister of one of my big sister's friends. And she looked at me dead in the eye, and I was quite in shock. I didn't actually know what was going on at the time, but she never told her friends to stop. So we went home, and you know, my granny we were a bit shaken, but you know, in the end we were all right. A week or two would go by, and she would end up coming to our house with her sister, and my granny would serve her food. Our parents and our grandparents, they work so hard to give us that life they would have wanted for themselves, and now it is our time to protect them. And when it comes to the elderly, it hits home for me. My late grandfather, he was attacked by a group of men. They tied him up, they stomped on his glasses and beat him up. When it comes to the elderly, we have so much to learn from them. They're full of experiences, but at the same time, they deserve more attention and care because they're vulnerable. In some ways, some of them become quite childlike. And those who prey and attack the defenselessness are cowards. It makes me sick that Asian elderly folks are targets because, as I said before, words hurt, but when you cross that line and lives are taken of the elderly and women, it's not okay, and you need to say it for what it is. It is hate crime. I think back to school, you know, my friends, they didn't speak up. I think back to that girl that was with the bunch of people who were throwing rocks at us. She never stood up. We all have a voice, and we should feel empowered to use it to protect those who are unable to. I also think back to our parents' days, or our grandparents. They didn't have phones. I'm so glad that we have phones so we can capture these moments. I'm glad we can use social media to spread awareness. I urge all my friends to not be silent. Call out racism. Educate, communicate, have those conversations, those difficult conversations. Growing up, we're taught to just sort of blend in, don't make a scene. Hopefully through time people will just become more educated, where culturally we'll become more diverse. And that sort of like those hopes kind of helped us keep going. But I really somehow thought things were getting better, albeit with still a lot of work to do. So please don't let this regression happen. I am fearful for my children. I want them to feel safe at school every day. I'm fearful for the elderly. I'm fearful of regression. Asian hate wasn't caused because of COVID. I feel like it escalated, something that was already there. Just over the past year, 3,800 crimes were reported, mostly women, and these are just the one that's reported. Note, as Asians, we're taught to just not make a fuss, not cause trouble. I would put my life on it that there have been way more. When it comes to the topic of racism, it makes me feel uneasy because, you know, when you see a problem, you want to solve it, and unfortunately this is not something that could be solved by one person's doing. Like, we all have to come together. Concluding off today's conversation, bad days don't kill people. Racism and misogyny does. To my fellow non-Asian friends, please stand with us. Please speak up for us. Don't just love our food, love our culture, love our community. I know a lot of you guys are scared, you're heartbroken, you're angry, and I want you guys to know that I see you, I stand with you, and I love you. Now is not the time to blend in and not make a scene. Like, not only do we stand together, we stand up. We are able to take space.